Robert, how are we?
I'm good. I can't answer for you, but I'm doing well.
I'll answer for me. I am also well. It's been a long day. I showed up to run at a running track that had a football match on, and we couldn't access, even though the timetable online said we could. But I'm now over it. After
Yeah, they wouldn't let you run on the track, so that just
no,
messed the whole day up, right?
it did. We'd planned to go as a team, and it was going to be a whole nice thing. We had a camera guy there, and yeah, even though the
So,
timetable online says you're more than welcome to do so,
so what
alas, there
what
is a
what did
football
the
game.
Buddha say about attachment to outcome and suffering?
I'm not exactly sure, but I'm assuming something about remaining calm and moving on, which is what I did my best to do. And here we are. Here we
Here
are.
we
So I think
are.
the best place to start is with the age old cliche of nice guys finishing last. Is it true?
Is it true? The cliche must have some truth to it, or it wouldn't exist, and we would keep saying it. I actually teach a course that I developed about 20 years ago called "Nice Guys Don't Finish Last; They Rot in Middle Management." It's a course for nice guys in business. So honestly, most men I work with that identify as nice guys, um, because we want to be good men, because we want to make a good impression, because we do like external validation. Often we do well enough, at least in appearances. We do all right. We're not down at the bottom of the heap for the most part. But I also say the nice guys are good at being good, but not great at being great. So we'll do good enough to get just enough validation, but not so well that we get too much spotlight, and now maybe we're going to get criticized or attacked or can't keep living up to those expectations. So we finish somewhere in the middle.
So what is the nice guy syndrome? Because I know you're obviously very, very in depth on this topic. And I think people might at this point be listening. They might have seen the title thinking, am I just directly being criticized here? I see myself as a nice, pleasant person, but it's
Yeah,
a little bit more complex than that, isn't it?
it is a little bit more complex. I know when people pick up my first book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, they often, most of us are pretty black and white. Well, why would somebody write a book teaching guys to be not nice? There's already enough not nice guys out there. And I remember when I was trying to get it published, when my agent was shopping it to publishers, a lot of editors at big publishing companies said, Robert, we like your book, is well written, but our marketing department says men won't buy a self help book, especially one that tells them they're losers. I go, no, you don't understand. You've missed it. That's pretty much pre Amazon, pre podcast where people get a lot of books recommended. But men do buy self help books, and men are conscious about being good men, about doing better. And the nice guy always does want to do better, but unfortunately, he's kind of licking his finger, holding up which way's the wind blowing. How is it I have to be to get approval, to get validation, to get recognition, and what do I need to hide about myself that might get rejected, disapproval, might get me punished, abused, abandoned. So the main problem with nice guys is our inauthenticity. We're not authentic. We're not a what you see is what you get kind of guy. We may be very good people, but there's always these fringes. Like a lot of nice guys, for example, think they're pretty honest. But the truth is, we pretty much lie about everything. If we think it might get a negative reaction from somebody, we'll leave that part out, shade it that way, don't bring that thing up, which in my mind is a lie because it's less than the whole truth.
So the nice guy that you're referring to, as almost a heads of terms for the rest of the conversation, is somebody that is not being authentic to themselves, and they're living a lie to please other people. You mentioned validation,
Right.
and I know that essentially a component of this is the covert contracts that really sit beneath this. So do you want to just explain to us what those are and
Oh
why
yeah,
those are the fundamental components of what makes a nice guy in this
I
context?
love talking about covert contracts. I think a lot of people tell me that's maybe their number one takeaway from No More Mr. Nice Guy is the covert contracts. And I'll just say up front, I am a recovering nice guy. I mean, I started working on my stuff about 30 years ago. If you'd met me 30 years ago, 35 years ago, I would have said, I'm a nice guy. I'm one of the nicest guys you'd meet. I couldn't figure out why everybody didn't have this paradigm. I was trying to be different from my father, different than all the bad men my mother had complained about. I'd heard women complain about in junior high and high school, online, the angry feminists. So I was trying not to be that guy. And if you're repressing so many things about you, your needs, your wants, your opinions, your sexuality, which is what nice guys pretty much do, they push it down. Again, we're chameleons. We're trying to become what we think other people want us to be, hiding whatever might get a negative reaction. if you repress all those things, like your needs, your wants, your sexuality, your emotions, your opinions, they still have to get expressed. I mean, especially like sexuality, it's still going to go somewhere. It's too big of a force to just tuck it away somewhere. And we can't live without getting our needs and wants met. So that means if we think we're and this is true for a lot of nice guys, if we think we're bad for having needs and wants, that people are going to reject us. I mean, just listen to enough red pill stuff nowadays, and it's almost don't be vulnerable, don't be needy, don't have needs and wants, don't expose yourself, don't be, but how the fuck are we supposed to get our needs and wants met if we don't acknowledge we have needs and wants? Now, we are accountable for taking responsibility for getting them met, and we are accountable for surrounding ourselves with people who are interested in helping us get our needs and wants met. But because nice guys, for the most part, don't think it's okay to have needs and wants, or they think everybody else's needs are more important than theirs, or they can only get their needs met if everybody else's needs have gotten met. They operate by 3 covert contracts, and all of the covert contracts are, as the term implies, they're covert, they're hidden, they're secretive. Even the nice guy often is not conscious that he's got this contract, this if-then, this giving to get dynamic going on. The other people, the rest of the world, God, don't know about the other end of the contract that the nice guy has. Maybe God does. He knows everything, right? So, but the nice guy is living by these 3 if-then propositions. And number 1, covert contract number 1, is if I'm a good guy, then I will be liked and loved. And so if I just, if I do all this virtue signaling, if I'm not like the bad men, if I'm not like my father, if I'm not one of those guys that just want sex when he's talking to women, if I'm that good guy, I'll be liked and loved. Now, this also plays out in what I call nice guy seduction, where we're nice guys. And this is how I used to always meet women. When I did meet them early on, is that, I would try to impress them. I would listen to them talk about their problems. I'd be attentive. I'd be different than the other men. I'd hide my sexual agenda. I wouldn't even know I had a sexual agenda. Nice guys have a terrible math problem. They think, if I hide my sexual agenda, women will want to take their clothes off. Those don't add up. So, you do things for them. You solve some problems. You make a car payment for her. You help her sister move. And then we think, well, not only will they approve of me, they'll want to be my girlfriend and they'll want to have sex with me. But of course, that leads to what we frequently nowadays call the friend zone. And I tell men, women don't put a guy in the friend zone. A man puts himself there in the way that he interacts and approaches women. Now, it's interesting. If you go out and Google, do word search for nice guy on the internet, you'll see a lot of my stuff, a lot of interviews and things I've done. But you'll also find blogs, and if they're written by a woman, go check it out, because almost any time a woman writes about a nice guy, the title will have something like "Beware of the nice guy. He's not so nice." And really what they usually talk about is that nice guy seduction, where, I met this guy. He was so kind and caring. He was there for me. He listened to me. He helped me out when I had problems. And then when, he got around to asking me to, go on a date, and I said, well, no, we're friends. Then he gets mad. Then he gets passive aggressive. Then he gets resentful. Then he blows up. Then he's aggressive. They're not so nice. Well, they're actually truly describing the pattern of the nice guy when he's using that covert contract, trying to get the woman's approval, validation, get her as a girlfriend, get her to sleep with him. It is curious to me, is like when the women are writing these blog articles, it's like they're totally oblivious that this guy had no agenda, that he was just being nice. But women truly do know why men talk to them and listen to them talk about the problems. We want to see them naked. But, the woman acts like, I had no idea he was even interested in me. Of course she did. But the guy was practicing nice guy seduction. That's covert contract number 1. And it often leads to us not being so nice. And it leads to us usually not getting what we want. Covert contract number 2, another if-then. If I read your mind and meet your needs without you having to ask, then you'll read my mind and meet my needs without me having to ask. Well, lots of problems here. 1, I really can't read your mind, and I'm going to give to you what I think I want to give to you so I can feel good about myself. It's called borrowed functioning. If you have a need and I help you meet your need, then you'll value me and I'm important to you. And so I'll pretend to read your mind. I'll give what I think you need to receive, even if you really don't, but I think it is. Then you'll read my mind, which you really can't do, and you'll give back to me, but you didn't even know there was a contract here. So you didn't know you were supposed to be giving anything back. But very minimum, you're supposed to appreciate me because I did all these kind things for you. And of course, if you're a woman, you'll be my girlfriend and want to have sex with me. So nobody knows that contract even exists. So it often does lead to a lot of resentment, frustration, passive aggressiveness, hurtful behavior. Covert contract number 3. If I do everything right, then I will have a smooth, problem-free life. Well, nobody ever does everything right. That's just impossible. And life is not smooth or problem-free. It's kind of a Peter Pan-ish, little boyish way of viewing the world. And nice guys do tend to be kind of immature in that way of just thinking, if I do everything right, cross the T's, dot the I's, nobody will ever get mad at me. Nobody ever criticize me. Nobody find fault with me. Nothing bad. I'll never get dumped. I'll never get ghosted. I did it right. None of those things should happen. So these 3 covert contracts not only make the nice guy often inauthentic, dishonest, not nice, but also frustrated and resentful and passive aggressive because they don't work. But the nice guy thinks they should, right? They should work. I'm doing everything right. This stuff should work. And one of the things I talk a lot about in the book is that when things aren't working the way the nice guy think they should, we double down and just do more of it. So we get even more disastrous results as doing more of something that already doesn't work.
So where does this originate from? Because there's a lot of what you've described in the contracts, which are all, going back to the original discussion, in many ways cliched in terms of how we've heard them described or how we've heard nice guys described in Hollywood, TV shows, all these things. We've seen this borne out visually in many, many circumstances. And there's probably people listening that think, wow, I do all those things. People pleasers, people that are yes men, people that avoid conflict. It's not to say that what you've described is avoiding difficult things, but it's choosing to not confront, as you said, your needs, your wants, and your desires. And if you don't confront those things, then and you try and fit somebody else's model, then you're always going to repel against it because you're bashing your head against a proverbial wall in some ways. So why are some men more susceptible to finding themselves in this behavioral pattern than others?
Good question. And I think there's a number of factors that can contribute. One is, I think a lot of the men I work with, I would include myself in this category, are just kind of temperament-wise, just kind of naturally fairly easygoing kind of people. Somebody says, hey, you want to go eat pizza or, Chinese? I'll go, I'm good, whatever, it's fine with me. And that's kind of the proverbial nice guy. Whatever you want to do, dear, And so for a lot of nice guys, that is kind of our natural temperament. My mother, bless her heart, she'll be 89 next week. When I, as an adult, would get into a relationship with a woman, and at some point, my mother would always tell the woman, Bobby never did like conflict. And I'm sitting there thinking, who the fuck likes conflict? I don't like, of course I didn't like conflict, but I do seem to be attracted to partners, to women who do like conflict. But I'm always the one, can we just have a rational discussion about this and resolve the problem and move on? No, we got to fight about it first. We got to have drama. I just don't like that. It's just not me, but a lot of people do. Okay. So that's just part of temperament. And then, I talk in No More Mr. Nice Guy about a lot of the things that influence the development of a nice guy. And there's certain commonalities, but there's no one model that says this turns people into nice guys. A lot of men I work with, at least when I first started working with nice guys 25, 30 years ago, reported having absent fathers, distant fathers, worked a lot, or they're gone, parents divorced, dad alcoholic, angry, maybe there but not available. And often with their mother, either they were kind of taking care of a depressed, codependent mother or dealing with a controlling, borderline type mother. Where so those are some pretty common patterns, but not everybody had that pattern. A lot of guys say, I grew up in a Leave It to Beaver family, and that's an old television show that you have to be somewhat of a certain age to know what it is. But nowadays, when I talk with a lot of the young men who identify as being nice guys, they tell me their father was a nice guy. And it makes sense. My son's 38 and he grew up with a nice guy father. I was writing No More Mr. Nice Guy while he was a teenager. And And a lot of guys tell me, all my nice guy father taught me was don't piss off your mother, because that's what dad was trying not to do, is piss off mother. So they kind of grow up with that's kind of the golden rule. Don't piss off the woman. Now, and there's a lot of other social factors that go into it. I was just listening to a podcast earlier today with a young influencer that works with young men. And he was just referencing, the hashtag Me Too, that if a guy, was, say, adolescence, when the whole hashtag Me Too thing came out, he might, really do everything under the sun to not ever come across, in any way that feels at all threatening to a woman. So he's going to be extremely passive. And maybe the women are even kind of more attracted to more of the little boyish looking passive young men because of their issues, with all of that. So a lot of things can play into this. But I think if you take it back to, I'm my doctorate's in marriage and family therapy. So, I had a fair amount of child development, human development courses. You go back to the very beginning. When a child comes into the world, they're completely dependent, needy, vulnerable, and dependent on their caregivers to recognize their needs and respond in timely, judicious, and consistent ways. Anything that feels, anytime they don't get a need met, baby's hungry and they don't get fed, cold and they're not wrapped up, got a tummy ache and they don't get burped, and they mess in their diaper, they don't get changed. Any of these experiences feel painful to a child, and they feel like an abandonment. And I remember in Child Development 101 hearing that for a child, an infant, abandonment equals death, and it does. If a child is not taken care of, they're going to die. And so the child, all they have, the only part of their brain really online at birth is kind of the amygdala down here on the brain stem that controls survival, respiration, heartbeat. It controls the fight, flight, freeze mechanism. It's all about survival. So the infant is in survival mode. Everything is about don't die. So when any child experiences an uncomfortable physical, emotional piece, they don't have the reasoning brain to figure it out. They assume they're the cause of it. Children are narcissistic by nature. They are the center of their world. And without being able to think about it, they're operating on basically the operating system of a reptile. They have to figure out how to manage the uncomfortable feelings they're feeling. And a second thing is try to prevent those uncomfortable feelings from happening again. Like if you kick a dog enough times something, it'll quit doing that thing. It'll do whatever it takes to avoid getting that painful experience. And we're all that way. All animals are that way. So here we are at a very early age. Prefrontal cortex, reasoning brain isn't online, won't be online for a while. All we are is in survival mode. And the theory is that amygdala down in the brain stem also stores up emotional memory. And that emotional memory that gets stored up is like our machine language, our operating system. And so we internalize inaccurately at a very young age beliefs about ourselves and the world. And so while we're trying to manage our uncomfortable feelings, some babies suck their thumbs, some babies eat, some babies cry, some babies don't cry, some babies don't eat, some babies smile a lot. So babies do whatever will make them feel better and increase the odds of them having pleasant experience, not unpleasant experience. I sucked my thumb till I was in kindergarten. So, maybe I was dealing with some uncomfortable emotions. So that becomes our emotional operating system, our machine language. We carry that into young childhood. As we grow, we begin to be able to see the world. We get more mobile. We be able to reason. And now what happens is we just kind of start gathering more data that gets layered on top of that basic emotional operating system about who we are and how we fit in the world. Everybody does this. Nice guy syndrome is just one of many ways to manage those uncomfortable feelings and try to prevent them happening again. And so that's why we try to become what we think people want us to be, hide anything that might get anything negative.
What are the other directions? Because obviously we're probably all thinking of, I know I certainly am. I'm thinking of sort of examples in my head of people I've met over the years, even some of my friends that I can put into certain categories that have sort of forked off at this point. And there's some things you mentioned that are interesting because a lot of the patterns that you've referenced in childhood that have led to nice guys that you've worked with, I can imagine could lead in very different directions. Let's take absent father as an example. So the desire, using self as an example, I know you mentioned not with the absent father side, but the desire to please the sort of maternal figures in your life, it comes from a desire to please those around you, and that is then developed and manifests more and more over time. It's not an anti other side of the fence thing. It's a validation and a people pleasing mentality. So how does somebody, or what is it that means that somebody focuses on people pleasing that can then manifest as resentment in that order, rather than it manifesting as resentment and their behavior then reflecting that resentment outwardly from the father being absent, for example? Are there any patterns that you've noticed as to why people go in certain directions? Hopefully that makes sense. I just see a very clear distinction between the nice guy repression and then the burst of resentment that come later, versus the resentment at source from the potential absent father or childhood situations that might occur that then develop more negative traits, and actually somebody's not a very nice guy the whole way through from that process.
Yeah. Well, let me see if I got it clear enough to answer. For example, again, my background's in marriage and family therapy. So, I mostly did relationship therapy for many years, but I worked with families too. So, parents come in with a kid, and almost always, if there's a problematic child in the family, somebody who gets identified, they're the problem. They bite their siblings, or they won't take a bath, or they throw tantrums, or they won't go to school, or they get kicked out of class, or whatever the problematic is, depending on the age. If you see a problematic child, you almost always see a nice child. And when I talk to nice guys over the years, almost every nice guy, if they have siblings, brothers or sisters, there's almost always what we would call the oppositionally defiant child. So here's two children growing up in the same family. Maybe, birth order might play in. Of course, temperament plays in. How the mom and dad treat each child. And as much as parents might want to claim, I love all my children the same, no, they don't. And they don't treat all their children the same. So parents connect better with one child over another. Every child pops out different. So you can have the same family, have this nice guy that follows all the rules, makes the good grades in school, goes to university, plays, does everything that the parents are approving of. And then you have the other member of the family, could be boy or girl, that keeps getting kicked out of school, is always getting into fights, getting suspended, maybe starts doing drugs and alcohol at an early age. If it's a girl, starts fucking all the inappropriate 20-something-year-olds when they're 14. They just do everything that is, pushes back against. So what children, when they grow up in a situation where they can't just be themselves, where there's not the encouragement and support to do something called differentiation. Let's say that the children are not encouraged to differentiate. And differentiation is just the ability to chart your own path, to ask yourself, what do I want? And follow it. In fact, I think probably every culture in the world, because I've asked a lot of people this question around the world, I'll ask them, in your culture, when a child is about 24 months old and they go through this phase of starting to say, myself, I want, I'm going to, what do they call that stage? What do they call it where you're at?
As a non-parent, I'm not sure if there's a technical term for that stage of growth, but I'm just trying to wrap my brain as to what
I'll help you.
Mind.
Here they call it the terrible twos.
Yes, we'd call the same. I was thinking more scientific. I was trying to think, is there an evolutionary? But no, okay. Colloquially speaking, the terrible twos. Yes,
there is. It is a completely appropriate developmental stage. What happens is the child's brain is getting wired up enough that they actually notice a difference between self and other. Prior to that, they don't, and so they start, asserting self. They want to tie their own shoes. They want to put on their own clothes. They want to pick out their own clothes. I had a stepson who wanted to wear these same pair of sweatpants to preschool every single day. And, as a parent, you can't wear the same pair. So, we get him several of the same kind with different colors. So we got him to wear at least different color, the same pair. Yeah. We found a way to work with it, but we also found a way to validate it was okay for him to say, I want to wear these sweatpants, as opposed to, what maybe his mother would have preferred he wore to preschool. So the preschool teachers would think he has a good mother, right? Because the mother cares about how he looks. The parental stuff comes into this. So in most cultures, I mean, we call it terrible twos when a child's just saying, I want. Right. And so now what's happening is that the small person wants things that the big person wants something different. The big person's always going to win, always, because they're big. They get their way. And so children have to find ways of coping with that. The two most common ways, if children are not supported to differentiate, i.e., say, what do I want? I want to wear sweatpants. Okay, great. Let's get you a bunch of colored sweatpants. You can wear sweatpants till the day you die if you want. You can be the old man in the nursing home still wearing the colored sweatpants. So if the child is encouraged to differentiate, they often tend to choose, pretty healthy, adaptive paths through life. And, you may need to give them some rails to do that in as they grow and develop. You don't just set them free, because I've worked with plenty of people where they go, my parent gave me no rules, no directions. I was the youngest. My parents were already tired of parenting. I got no direction whatsoever. And those people grow up really insecure. They don't know what's good enough, where the rules are, when have they've achieved enough to say good enough. So if a child does not have that encouragement to differentiate, the two paths that the child will often take, to one degree or another, is either go underground and they hide everything about them. There's that kind of nice guy pattern again. Hide their wants, their desires, their wishes. They go along to get along. They'll ask for forgiveness rather than permission. They may get caught at doing certain things because they're hiding it rather than doing it openly. And this may even just be normal developmental stuff for kids to do. But if in your family it's wrong or a sin or it's bad or it's annoying, you hide it. But you still do it. You just do it in secret. All right. Or the other is the child will just push back and do the opposite of whatever the parents want. You're going to go to school. No, I'm not. You're going to wear a pair of jeans to school. No, I'm not. Whatever. And this, once it starts in childhood, and often it is related to the child's temperament, it tends to get carried into adulthood, where the person will cut off their nose to spite their face. They'll just do the opposite, because in their mind, if the parent wins and gets their way, they lose. And so they don't exist, basically. So the only way to exist is do the opposite. So if the parents value education, they flunk out. If the parents value sexual purity, they're fucking around at a young age. They will do the opposite. Now, what I've seen is when I started working with nice guys, I thought most nice guys were more kind of like me, that first category, that what I call the I'm so good nice guy. On the surface, doing everything right, but hiding a lot of stuff, right? But I soon found out there were a lot of nice guys who also identified with that rebellious, oppositionally defiant child. Maybe that ADHD that kicked in. They couldn't remember to do anything. They couldn't pay attention in class. They caused problems. They got in fights. Just whatever, problematic. Maybe started drinking, drug at an early age, drop out of school. But maybe at some point they went in the military, or found love, or had a kid, or found Jesus, or whatever, and they kind of got their life straightened out, and they decided, I got to get this together. I need to be a nicer person. Now, all that stuff is still right at the surface. It's called toxic shame. They go, if anybody finds out, it knows me, they're going to find out I'm a fuck up. Whereas the I'm so good nice guy, more like me, our toxic shame's way pressed down, really out of sight. But I'm so good. I do everything right. I'm not like that. I'm not like my bad sibling over there, or I'm not like my angry dad, or I'm not like the man that only wants sex that I hear women complain about. But both guys are being driven by a sense of toxic shame, but probably their inherent personality developed how they kind of reacted to a very similar family system. Now, I don't know if that answered the question or not. I think there's a part of it I still missed, but I'm willing to take a stab at that second part if you want to go with
No, it does in many ways. I think my curiosity was essentially at what point do these behavioral patterns start to manifest, and why is it? And my understanding is it's temperament and parenting style that ultimately sort of molds the direction. But the real takeaway for me there, in terms of the answer that I guess I was looking for, or my curiosity being quashed, is that facilitating individuality and authenticity is at the core of all of this. And whether that's in childhood or whether that's once you've worked with somebody, or whether that's for anyone listening now, that's what we should focus on, and that's what we should try and bring out in ourselves. So one, as a concept, it forces you to constantly reflect and constantly analyze. So how do you encourage people to discover that within themselves? We're a few steps ahead in terms of the narrative of where we need to get to, but I think before we actually answer that question, there's probably a lot more to unpack. So one thing that struck me as you were talking there was the sense of entitlement that could spread out with relationships from the nice guys that are immersed in these covert contracts that believe, I'm doing everything right all the time. I'm modeling myself on this ideal person. I'm ticking all the boxes. Therefore, I deserve X, Y, Z. Does that manifest as aggressively outwardly from a sexual setting, or is it something that is exacerbated within that because of the sort of more, I guess, the more animalistic nature that goes with it?
That's a good question, and it's hard to say because, again, there's two types of nice guys. The one that would say, I'm checking off all the boxes. I'm good. Everything should go my way. The other one is, I'm really not all that good, but I'm trying to check off all the boxes. And so they're not surprised when things don't go their way. So we got two different dynamics going on. And at the core piece, kind of going back to what you said, whether we do this in childhood or adulthood, really what the core piece is, how do we differentiate as individuals? How do we ask ourselves, what do I want? What's important to me? What is true for me? And then follow that path, hold on to that path when there's the resistance between our ears in the form of neurotic guilt or anxiety or fear or emotional dissonance, or resistance from the outside of us, the people that give us the change back messages, the family that say we're doing it wrong, a partner, just people in culture, society, our church. And so to really live a full life, whether we identify as a nice guy or not, and that really doesn't matter because most of us have been doing something that has taken us away from our true differentiated self. So the process of learning to ask, what do I want? It seems kind of funny that, because at 2, we knew. And now at 22 or 42 or 52, it's kind of like we have to go to therapy and
you need to unpack. You need to work backwards.
How do we unpack and find out what do we want? Because I work with a lot of nice guys where I talk about making their needs a priority, and I just get a blank stare. I don't even know what I need or want. I'll give them a legal pad and say, well, let's start making a thing, a list of things you could do to make your needs a priority. They'll just stare at it, just blank stare, like I don't even know where to start.
Is that rooted in fear of success or fear of failure?
That's an interesting question. And I think nice guys carry both. I think there's the fear of failure is usually that fear of looking foolish, getting rejected, not living up to expectations. I think in most nice guys, and this is maybe why we get also stuck in middle management, I think that fear of success might even be a bigger one. Because I do an exercise a lot of times with men in my workshops where I'll ask them a specific question and wrapped around fear of success. And it might be, okay, you see a pretty woman. What is everything that might go wrong if you approach a pretty woman and start talking to her? And when we go around the room, we come up 20, 25 things that might go wrong, all the way from, look foolish, get rejected, get a drink thrown in your face, her boyfriend comes and beats you up, to all the way to she becomes your girlfriend, she's a total bitch, she divorces you, takes the kids, and you pay child support the rest of your life. All that stuff could happen. That is what could happen if you are successful in talking to the woman. A similar question. I'll say, okay, what are all the things that might go wrong if you try to put your penis in a vagina? Well, again, we can come up with 20 or 25 things that might go wrong. Well, you might not keep an erection. You might come too quickly. You might get an STD. You might get her pregnant. She might say you raped her, on social media. You become a hashtag Me Too, casualty. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. And so one of the things when I talk with guys about this, and this is I think why a lot of guys stay really stuck in life, is because our minds, whether consciously or unconsciously, can come up with everything that might go wrong. And I say, if there's any degree of likelihood of any of those things happening, it actually makes logical sense to not do the behavior that might lead to those things happening. There's a logic to that. But of course, if you venture out of your comfort zone in any way, if you challenge yourself in any way, if you get out on your edge in any way, there's many things can go wrong. So the real question is not what could go wrong, but the real question is, could you handle it if it did? Could you adapt? Could you grow? Could you develop new skills, new mastery? Could you develop a team? Could you delegate? Could you? So, but we don't usually get to that part. We just kind of stay at the unconscious part of, oh, I might get rejected. That's usually enough to not move forward. So I think both those fears are real. But in nice guys, I really think that fear of success might be the bigger fear than fear of failure.
There's a rewiring process in a sense there that I think you described, which is that the only access that these nice guys will get to the development of the ability to adapt when things might go wrong, because they will. That's what life likes to do.
Things go wrong?
Is through taking the step towards the thing that actually has the 25 downstream potential risks inherent with it. And I can't remember what it was years ago, but the thing that I was recovering from a period of depression in 2016, and one of the biggest things that really helped me return from just a day-to-day human point of view, but ultimately improve my communication skills, maybe much more effective in terms of just managing situations socially, managing situations professionally. Somebody, it's all a bit of a blurry period, which is the challenge. I can't remember who told me this, but the advice was make an effort to hold a conversation with somebody for 60 seconds or more on a topic that can be ostensibly boring. And whilst you might think it's not adding any value to their day, it's not interesting, it's not cool, people are impressed when you can maintain a conversation for 60 seconds or more, because people inherently don't do that because it's uncomfortable. So if you can be the person that takes the step forward and is the one that forces a conversation with a stranger for 60 seconds or more, that inherently, even if it's about the weather, is something that is admirable to that person, even though it might be fearful for you, because you're like, I'm just talking about the weather. That's terrifying. They'll think I'm an idiot. And that for me was a huge part of my rebuild from a confidence point of view, where if I was out walking the dog, if I was using a self-checkout machine, if I was talking to somebody at a coffee shop, if I saw somebody reading a specific book, the fear that I felt and then the power and control over myself that I felt once I'd had a simple basic that could often be 3, 5, 10, 12 minutes, by the way, key detail.
Yeah.
I'd already listed in my head all of the downstream risks and ridicule that I'd been manifesting for quite a while in a bit of a negative period of my mental health, a very severe negative period of my mental health, in fact. So coming out of that, it was a real breaking of the inertia, and the momentum that built from that meant that the skills that I developed through breaking that inertia meant that that list of 25 shrinks to 1, which is, I'm married now, but if I went up to approach a woman now, the worst thing that could happen in my head at the point of moving over would be, it could be a no, about turn, move on.
The conversation doesn't happen. That's it.
Yeah. So it's, again, I think that's broadly applicable to so many things in life that go beyond this, which is why I think that the patterns of behavior are so key. And I think it's why the notion of success or failure really jumped into my head as the two directions these things can go. But I think the learning for me from that I've carried with me is just actually how much skill acquisition comes from leading with authenticity.
Yeah.
And
I like that a lot. No, I like what you're sharing for a couple of reasons. When I got divorced in my late 40s, I'd been married twice. I had never really lived alone as an adult. I'd never really dated since, in college. My idea of dating was nice guy seduction, sit next to a girl, try to impress her, know all the answers, offer to do things for her. Maybe at some point say, I don't guess you'd want to go out with me, would you? And then if I got a girlfriend, I kept her forever. So here I was, single and alone and depressed. My business wasn't expanding like I thought it would. I was living alone. My kids had graduated from high school, and my son went in the Marines. My stepson went away to college. And so it was a challenging time. And I did the same thing. I just made myself start getting out in public. I'd go around people. If I could do anything in public, I'd go do it in public. Or if I was reading my Sunday newspaper or reading my Kindle or working on my laptop or even eating. I'd go to like happy hour at restaurants just to be, and I'd talk to the bartenders. I'd talk to the people. I really worked at being a social animal. And it really transformed my life. And it got to where it became, how I started often meeting other people, guys and women, expanding my life, dating women, to where guys, my clients, started saying, Robert, what are you doing? You're having success meeting women. You're having success getting laid. Teach us. And I go, I'm not a dating coach, but it really was built around just getting out of my comfort zone, getting out in public, and where I kind of came up with this mantra for guys when I was in my dating programs: get out of the house, expand your route, linger in public, talk to the people you meet, test for interest. And that's a skill set I can teach. Very simple 3-point skill set. And then walk through the open doors. You don't have to go out and make things happen. You don't have to go out and find the prettiest woman and think up some clever line to go talk to her and get her to give you a phone number. You just start interacting with people. Get out of your comfort zone. And I think a really powerful thing that does, not only it expands you, but it makes you look more socially adept, which is very attractive. But I think another thing that does, and really relates to that depression, is when we're not in a state mentally of being challenged, like, we got this problem to solve or this thing to build or whatever. We kind of rest in a part of our brain called the default mode network. And the default mode network is just it's me. And they call it default mode network is because it's where the brain goes when it's kind of at idle, when it doesn't have work to do, challenges to be met. And so basically it starts just looking at the whole world through the lens of me. And, that could lead to all kinds of really negative, not pretty stuff. Well, I'm not good enough looking, or I'm not successful enough, or nobody wants to talk to me, or why don't I have a girlfriend at this age, or why, and so that default mode network, it doesn't have to all go to that negative, but it often just starts seeing the whole world in terms of me. It's very ego oriented. Now, what they've found is that psychedelics take you out of that default mode network. That's why you see everything is one and everything is love. Meditation takes you out of it. But I also believe going out and being in that social place that you're talking about and kind of just getting curious about people rather than going, I hope I don't say something stupid. I hope I don't embarrass myself, where you really do get curious about people and carry on a conversation of 60 seconds or more. And as you said, they often surprisingly go longer. It takes you out of that default mode network, and it lights up other parts of the brain that in general are going to make you feel better than just sitting around in that part of the brain that's all about me. So, I mean, there's a lot of, just good, that was great advice you got.
It was life-changing in many ways, and it's something I try and exude now. I kind of just enjoy it. It's interesting to. I think it gives. I don't want to sound egotistical anyway, but it's a skill that I've developed that I think can give other people confidence as well. Because if you get somebody that isn't used to having a conversation with a stranger for more than 10 seconds or so, and then they do it, then that's one rep that they've completed, which might lead to another rep. And I'm firmly of the opinion that life is just repetitions after repetitions. There's a gym bro in me that just won't die, it seems. But I think the question I keep coming back to amidst the sort of the discussion we've been having is, what role do women play in helping us find our authentic self? Because those that are on the more skeptical side of the coin might be listening to a lot of our discussion thinking, this is very, very male driven. This is almost bordering on narratives, depending on which media outlet it's with. They might align it to certain things, and everything's dangerous territory with this discussion.
We got to put it in this category, put it in that category.
Exactly.
Got to be one or the
which
other.
I don't believe we're doing. I believe we are reflecting on men as individuals, but how individual men like to group themselves into boxes, where the boxes are being right. I'm doing all of the right things, which de-individualizes men. So how do we as men, and how do we as women, those listening, bring out the best in the men in our lives? And I guess downstream of that, for those men that feel that they can improve themselves, maybe off the back of this conversation or are thinking about things, how can they be more in sync with what women are actually looking for from an attraction point of view?
Okay. Thinking about it from a couple of points of view. Let me try to come up with two answers and not forget the second one by the time I get done the first one. When my publisher, Barnes and Noble, published No More Mr. Nice Guy 20 plus years ago, I think they hoped there was going to be some backlash, some blowback from women, feminism. I don't know. There wasn't. I think they thought it might sell some books, but women don't react negatively to No More Mr. Nice Guy. Maybe they might to the cover. I occasionally get, angry email, but more from men than women. And they're just very rare. I don't get that many, surprisingly. The majority of women that read No More Mr. Nice Guy like it for a couple of reasons. Maybe number one, they see their nice girl patterns in themselves of doing a lot of the same things that I'm addressing in men. And a lot of women like it because now they understand a man in their life better. Maybe their father's a nice guy. Maybe an ex was. I have a lot of guys tell me their ex-girlfriend or ex-wives give them the book. I know a lot of guys tell me their female therapists give them the book. So there's nothing in it that is anti-female. It's about men being more authentic, making their needs a priority, being better communicators about it, being more honest, being more present. And so, that's all, helpful. Women tend to find all those things to be good things. I'm trying to come back to now what was the second piece I was going to answer about this in terms of women.
So how does it then, how can we, or how can you support men in terms of doing what is actually the right thing for them to become more attractive to women? Because as you've discussed, and we briefly been over, and it, again, is another cliche, is that the nice guy persona can more often than not put the individual in the friend zone. It can send the wrong signal because, as you've clearly highlighted, consciously pretending you don't have an agenda means that the agenda isn't presented, which means that the relationship is misaligned. When a nice guy reveals agenda, it's quite a very simple flow when you actually map it out like that, isn't it? But it's a case of, what can any people that view themselves as nice guys listening understand as to how they can move away from what they believe is the right action in general terms, and more what is the right action for them as an individual to become more attractive to women?
A line that I've been using for a while. A few things around attraction. When I first started developing kind of my dating material for men, I tried to keep it, authentic. This I call it conscious dating, and I think I tell guys my books on dating really aren't about how to get a girlfriend. It's just you want to get a girlfriend, and so because you want to get a girlfriend, I'm going to teach you how to expand your emotional and social intelligence, and so your desire to get a girlfriend will make you more of a social animal, more of a person who actually can venture out and have those discussions in life, which in the process makes you more attractive to the feminine. I frequently said in the past that if a man interacts with a woman with confidence, that it triggers the exact same chemicals in her brain that the man would experience if the woman lifted her shirt and showed her breasts. We don't think, do I like that? We do, right? It's wired into us by Mother Nature. For the feminine creature, it's the same thing. That degree of confidence is just wired into them. And I know, like when I do interviews, like with female dating coaches, and I say something like, the feminine is highly attracted to a man who's comfortable in his own skin, knows where he's going, and looks like he's having a good time going there. The women coaches always go, they just sigh, they moan. Like, yeah, that's it. Because, there's so much information out there for men about how to attract women, all the way from, be a nice guy and, be all the way to, to red pill stuff, be aggressive, be this, be that, don't be too available, don't be vulnerable, all of that. But I think if we take our attention off of the women, get comfortable in our own body. What does that mean? Well, I take good care of myself. I like myself. I get enough sleep. I eat well. I exercise. I live life on my terms. I know where I'm going. I know the difference I'm making in the world. I know, I have clarity of why I'm here. Took me a while to get there, but I have clarity. And I am having a good time going there. I love my life. I love the things that my life enables me to do, the difference I'm making, how it lets me interact with my wife, my stepkids, my son, my granddaughter, my mother, with the men of the world. And that makes me highly attractive to the feminine. I define the feminine, not just women, but dogs, cats, babies, money, adventure, opportunity, anything that's not nailed down, just that masculine, feminine polarity. And as a result, not only is my wife highly attracted to me, she's always pointing out women. That woman's coming on to you. That woman is flirting with you. That woman is trying to get your attention. And I'm not even trying. I don't try to get anybody's attention. But there's just something about you living purposefully. Again, that being comfortable in your own skin. And I think that's what, for example, maybe shifted for you. When you were depressed, you're not comfortable in your own skin. You don't know why anybody else would be comfortable being around you. But when you got out of your own thinking about you and started getting curious about other people and having conversations with them, I suspect that made you highly attractive, even to people just kind of watching you out of the corner of their eye. Who is that guy? He sure seems, comfortable in his own skin having that conversation. People notice that. They do pay attention to it. So that's where I think, for men, whether they're in relationship or single, getting more conscious about these kinds of things makes us happier and makes us more attractive to the things we want to attract. Again, whether it's money, opportunity, adventure, women. And help me out. I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about. How can women help us with that? But besides being attracted to it,
I think you've covered off a lot of what my curiosity led me to, and I think the summary for me there is seek internal validation, not external validation, and the results will flip. They're almost inversely related. Whereas the more validation you receive internally, the more external validation you will receive. The more external validation you go seeking, the less internal validation you will receive.
Yeah, I love that. I love that paradigm. Yeah.
I had in my notes here, simple. I had in my notes a summary of the covert contracts as conceal your true self, be who others want you to be, and have a perfect, fulfilling life. It's essentially one of the flows that you mapped out in the book. And I guess the simple way to reframe that is that's the misconception, is that's the flow. When in reality, if we flip it on its head and make it reveal your true self, be who you want to be, you will have a perfect, fulfilling life. But there's work to be done to get there.
And especially if you see everything that happens along the way as perfect. And again, that can be a stretch, and it can even be kind of challenging. I had a tumor blocking my small intestine about 7 years ago. Over a period of 3 months, I went to doctors here in Mexico, the United States. I lost over 30 pounds. I was in pain all the time, cramps. I couldn't eat, couldn't go to the bathroom. It just got to where I was sleeping all the time. And luckily, a doctor down here in Mexico ran the right test, found it, did the surgery, took it out, and I've been good. Would I want to go through that with any kind of regularity? No. Am I glad it happened? I kind of am. It was a very empowering experience that taught me about surrender. I didn't know. I assumed I was dying. I assumed whatever I had was killing me. Nobody knew what I had. Was it a parasite? Was it an ulcer? Was it an impacted colon? Was it the tumor? Was it, nobody knew. But I surrendered into the pain. I surrendered into, I'm maybe going to die and not know what's killing me. There's an acceptance. I learned to breathe into it. People start saying, Robert, how are you feeling? And, I wasn't better. I didn't get better until they took the tumor out. It was a golf ball sized tumor blocking my intestine. But I said, I don't know if I'm getting better or I've just gotten better at feeling bad. And it was. I'd gotten better at feeling bad because I'd surrendered and accepted. And Kurt Vonnegut wrote in Slaughterhouse-Five that all creativity involves a dance with death. And, there's so many, almost any fiction you read has death in it. I just finished reading a book that I read when I was a kid called Where the Red Fern Grows, about this boy in the Ozarks of Arkansas with 2 hunting dogs. And the dogs die in the end. I don't want to give it away, but, I was weeping, I was sobbing. But almost any fiction is really talking about how do we get comfortable with the reality of death. I did. I got comfortable with dying. When they took me into surgery, in a Mexican hospital, the Mexican doctor, I was as at peace as I could be with whatever this might lead to. The Valium and the IV might have helped that as well. But yeah, I was really okay with it. Now, 6 years later, I tell people, this is gravy time. I'm playing on house money. My life's already exceeded my expectations. I already should have died. Everything else is just, I'm good to go. And so if you can kind of get to whether it's death, rejection, losing all your money, having a business fail, when you realize, okay, it's not going to kill me, then you can live a pretty bold life.
The more refined our ability to reframe a situation becomes, the less power it has over us.
Yeah.
Which is something that I've refined and learned massively through ultra endurance events over the years. I willingly step into the vulnerable unknown, which is getting further and further and longer and more sleep deprived as time goes on.
I bet.
Because I know that there's lessons to be learnt about myself along the way. And if I don't go seeking them, I won't get the answers which I know will move me forwards. And when the inevitable downturn in my emotions comes, which I kind of went looking for in the first place, that's where I get to sort of meet myself, shake my hand and go, interesting. Who are you really? What are the questions you're looking for? What are the answers that you didn't know you needed? And then move forwards from there. And I think if we really trace it back to that 60-second conversation piece, the only agenda I had there was confidence development.
Yeah.
Maybe there was a covert contract in the back of my head. I don't know. But that willingness to break the inertia and commit to learning something about myself and embracing the uncomfortable is scalable, relative, translatable across things.
Yeah.
And I think that is the beauty of what you've described, which is you could have let that set of circumstances strike the fear of God into you for the next year. Oh, I'm worried it's going to come back. I'm worried that this is all that. It took them so long to determine what it was. I've lost all faith in the health system here. Maybe I should move back to this place where it can spiral in one direction. But the more, as you said right at the start,
it's all a good story,
that's it. And if we apply the lessons of the Buddha that you referenced our track cancellation today, then it allows us to breathe, be calm, and take control of our emotions, which is a very powerful and, in my opinion, very masculine thing to be able to do, because the more emotionally aware and emotionally intelligent we can be, as you've already referenced, the more authentic we're being, and the more authentic we're being is outwardly more attractive to females, which I think if we really boil down a lot of what the internet is looking for in terms of answers to these questions about masculinity, dating, power, status, the ideal man, all of this stuff, that's really what a lot of people behind the keyboard are looking for. Is
it's all about sex.
Yeah,
everything.
It's if we simplify it down, a lot of the narratives you see around this are alarmingly transparent. But I think the thing I really want to pick up on is you referred to yourself earlier as a nice guy in rehab, constantly rehabilitating. So what does rehabilitating a nice guy look like?
Well, there's no one nice guy model. There's no one right way. Now, what I've found is that the path I took seems to work well for a lot of nice guys. I got into a men's program, got into a 12-step group, got in therapy, got into a men's group. I've done most of my growth in men's programs, whether it be a men's group, and just I've been in a men's program for the last 5 years. So I still get that value out of the connection with men, where I can go get supported, get loved, get challenged, get sharpened, held accountable. Because, anything that we're going to do, the challenge, like going back to that fear of success, if we have to go venture into that unknown, into the abyss, and not know what's there and can we handle it, we won't. But you know what? If you got a posse, if you got a tribe, if you got a team of guys, you can go venture into anything knowing that they're there for you. You can talk to them. They're going to accompany you. They're on your side. So I found that men especially, I think, do their best work in a group. because I've done a lot of one-on-one individual therapy with guys. And if you get two guys talking to each other, we're going to get in our heads, right? We're just going to happen. We're going to analyze shit. You get men in a room, things get real. How we interact with people, our social skills or lack of them show up. Just things happen. We create a little mini social context. So I encourage men I say in No More Mr. Nice Guy, don't try to do this alone. You didn't become a nice guy in social isolation. You won't recover in social isolation, whether it's finding safe people to reveal your toxic shame, getting more accurate feedback about who you are. I mean, I've told so many men, I've got so much shame about this. And I go, actually, that makes you real normal. That isn't a defect. That makes you a normal guy. Oh, okay. And if you get guys in a group and, maybe 2 or 3 people share, something about themselves. And then one guy says, well, I've got this issue where, I can't stop looking at porn. And then everybody else is going like this, the other guys hadn't mentioned that yet, but one guy mentioned it. Now the rest of them mention it. And then they find out I'm not alone. I'm not the only one like this. I don't have judgment of that guy for looking at porn, but I sure do have a lot of judgment of myself for looking at porn. So you can start letting go of the shame, and which kind of leads to a lot of these, destructive behaviors beginning to disappear over time just by revealing them to people that don't judge you for them. So get connected with safe people. And again, with men, being in a men's group is a great way to go. I had to learn to be honest. I thought I was an honest guy, but really, I left stuff out. And so one thing I started doing, I was in my second marriage when I started this work and wrote No More Mr. Nice Guy. What I started doing is every time the little lie coach in my head was coaching me on how to tell the story, tell the lie, what to leave out. Most of us have that lie coach if we actually listen to it. Whenever I would hear that, I would go to my then wife and say, I was going to lie to you. Here's the lie I was going to tell you. Here's the truth. And you know what? She never reacted negatively to that. I used to tell her middle name ought to be overreact, because she did in most situations. Now, if I was lying to her, she knew it and she'd react. But I'd go and tell her, I was going to lie to you. And she never got mad about that. How come I didn't learn this a long time ago? I also learned to set boundaries. I was in my 30s in my second marriage with a PhD in marriage and family therapy. I'd never heard of boundaries till the therapist, very first session, she put a string on the ground and kind of walked me through a boundary lesson. And I thought, why didn't I ever learn about that as a kid? I had to learn about making my needs a priority, asking for what I want, letting people give to me, practice receiving, because nice guys have a hard time receiving, letting people give to them. We'll use our covert contracts, but then we don't let people give to us. So those are just a lot of the key pieces, and that differentiation piece I've mentioned. Learning to ask ourselves, what do I want? What's important to me? What feels right to me? And then going in that direction. Again, even if we feel the anxiety and neurotic guilt, or we get the change back messages, you're giving your dad a heart attack, or you're making your mother cry. Whatever it is, we do it because it feels right and it feels true to us. That makes us authentic, integrated men. And so all of these pieces kind of fit together. And again, I found that just the best way to go about this is within a group of other men, where we learn to be vulnerable. We learn how to fit in with men, where we can accept our masculinity, because nowadays masculinity is kind of considered kind of a negative trait to have. But I think we have to embrace the part of us as masculine and embrace the part of us as feminine. I mean, we all have that inner yin and yang, that polarity. But a lot of guys nowadays have pushed away that masculine side, so we think it's going to get a negative reaction. So there's a lot of pieces involved, no right way, but I'd say the best place to start is find a community, find a group of men, whether it's 12-step group, men's therapy group, some larger program of men, Mankind Project. There's a lot of good stuff out there.
The single biggest turning point for me as an individual was doing away with the ego and stigma and perception or definition of masculinity and the traditional notion of success that ultimately led me to depression in the first place. Yeah. And the more honest, authentic, open, and emotionally aware and willing to tackle those emotions head on rather than run away from them that I've become over the years, the more power I have over myself, how I respond to things, what I do next, what's truly important to me, which means that in my mind, I'm much more resilient. I'm much more successful in a traditional and in my definition sense. I'm much more fulfilled. I'm much more available. I'm much more in line with what I want to be doing. And the only thing that's opened the door or given me the key for that is honesty, authenticity, and vulnerability. And vulnerability is a big, scary word to a lot of men, because I think it's hardwired into us to avoid it. But in reality, I'm sure Kobe Bryant didn't get to be as good as he was by being the best and getting everything right every single time. The only reason he knew where he needed to improve was by highlighting his vulnerabilities and knowing, right, that is what I'm going to improve. And the amount of men that we idolize around the world, special forces soldiers, all of these big
we live in a culture where we idolize a lot of those kind of people.
Peaks of masculinity in a traditional sense, but special forces soldiers don't want somebody who's full of ego and emotionally unaware next to them, because they will get them killed.
Yeah.
And I've had lots of conversations with them who've said as much, which is why I always refer to that as an example now, because a lot of men that think they're hard and think they're infallible and think that vulnerability is a hindrance rather than, in my opinion, a superpower, would idolize these men. And these men will say the reason we are men that are worth idolizing is because we have become comfortable with the reality that being vulnerable opens doors for us that ego never could. So we're approaching my bedtime, Robert. So
we're approaching my lunchtime, so it's all good.
In Mexico, lunchtime in Mexico versus descending darkness in Scotland. A stark contrast. But final question is, where is the best place for people to find you, about your books, more about what you're up to, and anything that comes out in the future?
All right. Two best places, either drglover.com, just drglover.com. It's got my courses, my workshops, just, everything I got going on. The other is integrationnation.net. That's my men's program that I launched a year ago. My intention is to build the world's largest online meeting place for men, and men need community. So they can go to integrationnation.net to find out more about that.
And if there's one thing that any nice guys that feel seen watching or listening today have taken, well, if there's anyone that feels seen, if there's one thing that they can do tomorrow to start moving towards a more authentic self, what would it be?
It goes back to what you were sharing. One of my personal mantras is, I love waking up in the morning not knowing how my day's going to end. I had a client one time in a group says, Robert, that's my idea of hell. And, he just, everything had to be. So I'd say, get out of the house and do something different. Go someplace you don't normally go. Talk to somebody you don't normally talk to. Do something that doesn't involve watching the same YouTube videos, spending the same amount of time on a screen, doing the same thing over and over again. Because I really think, you mentioned success. I think for me, success is having choices in life. You get to choose what you do every day when you get up. I get to choose what I do every day when I get up. And to me, that's success. And so if people want to be successful, start choosing something that's not just a repetition of the same old thing you've done every day before this. Then life really gets interesting. So get up tomorrow and do something different.
Fantastic. Simple. And for anyone who's got an objection swirling around in their head right now, there's a way around it. There's a choice. There's a choice.
Leave your comments. I don't ever read them anyway. So leave your comments.
I'll send the highlights to you over email.
Send me the highlights.
No, we'll link all of the references that Robert's given there in the show notes down below. So please do go and check them out. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed that conversation. Always a topic I'm very interested to hear more about. And thank you again.
Thanks for the invitation. I enjoyed it. Have a good night's sleep.